So what kind of stuff do we find in here? How is this going to affect our land use and development in Kamloops? This is from the Climate Action Plan. So here we see we've got the buzzwords: mixed use development, connectivity of transit and active transportation, and they're going to put a boundary to keep the location of the new growth in the urban core. Well, let's go back to the municipal primer that was explaining what Agenda 21 is. Do you remember how it works? There's an official community plan. Where do you think that idea came from? From Agenda 21 from the United Nations. Now we have an official community plan. That was the new legislation in 1998, the Local Government Act. So it says here that there should be a hard edge for the limits of the urban boundary where we do our development. And then we're going to do mixed use development and promote public transit, get away from the automobile. Why did we pay a consultant? I'm not sure how much it was. It would have been tens of thousands of dollars at least to write us a new plan. We could have just copied and pasted the one from 1994. Other stuff you'll find in our OCP is, discouragement of further subdivision, and it goes on and on. It's not just there, it's also in the TNRD. This is from 2013. This is our regional development strategy. Talks about a sustainable future and, hey, develop in a compact, cost-effective, sustainable manner, encouraging mixed-use development. Starting to sound familiar. Now we're going to get into a concept called smart growth. This is what they call it in the United States. In Europe, it's called densification, and it's also related to some other terms which I'm not allowed to say. But if you look at this picture, if you put this into Google, this is what will come up if you're looking for 15-minute city. So it looks pretty nice. We've got trees, people out there walking around, having fun, cafes. I wouldn't mind living there. It looks pretty good, but do you notice anything missing? There's no cars. Okay? So it's an urban planning concept with no vehicles that you own.
Yes.
There's still vehicles, you just don't own them or control them. Okay, so other names for this, these are all euphemisms for the same thing. Stack and pack, urban densification, complete neighborhoods, complete streets, mixed-use densification, intelligent cities, resilient cities, 15-minute cities is all kind of related. It's all smart growth. And in Kamloops here, don't worry, we're not doing a 15-minute city, we're doing a 10-minute city. So we're talking about land use and sustainable development. One of the biggest things in sustainable development is sustaining, which means you can't develop, right? It's an oxymoron. So everything we sustain will never be developed. This is called ESAs, they're environmental sensitive areas, and this is conservation through bylaw. All the purple areas that are outlined there, those are grasslands and areas where development cannot be done without bylaw and environmental assessment, I believe. There's another way that we conserve land. It's called conservation through covenants. Covenants are pretty important. When you make a covenant, you hear the word covenant, it comes from the Bible, it comes from old stories, people make blood covenants. The covenant is for life, and it stays with whatever you make a covenant on, for the life of that thing. So when you make a covenant on land, it stays with the land. If somebody sells the land, the covenant stays with it. So it has nothing to do with who owns it. So right now they're encouraging people to put land into conservatory, lack of the right word. They're trying to put it into conservation trusts, okay? And those covenants stay with the land. So once it's being conserved, it's being sustained, and it can never be developed or used. This is the sustainable side of sustainable development. I told you guys earlier that we send reports to the United Nations, like a good little school kid sending it into our teacher. Canada sends a report. This is our second report from 2023. It's a voluntary national report, I think it's called. Review, pardon me. All the dark green areas are new areas that were added since 2017. That was the last report we sent. And all the dark blue are new areas. And actually, if I showed you northern Canada, you can see a lot more areas that were recently added. If we zoom in on BC, we can see all the new land that's been added into conservation since 2017. And the key here, guys, is that once you put land into conservation, it's conserved, it's sustained, it's not going to be developed. It's a one-way street. You go this way, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to go backwards. Let's talk about the Agricultural Land Commission, ALC. So a lot of land around Kamloops is what's called Agricultural Land Reserve, ALR land, which has special restrictions on it to promote farming. And I think actually that the intent of that is good, but if you look at the long-term effect, it's taking us in one direction, and that might not be a good place. Let's look at it. We're restricting development. You can't turn it into houses. They want to consolidate the land. They don't want small parcels and many owners. They want big parcels with few owners. They're encouraging conservation and easements along the property for the environment. So we're not going in a direction where there's going to be more farms. We're going in a direction where more land is going to get conserved with less owners. So it begs the question, will there be more or less farming in the future? All that talk about food security, is that just talk? Or is there something else going on? I'm not saying at all that there, that there's some sort of conspiracy, like some people will say. But definitely the effect of this is that there's going to be less land available for farming. Is there a war on farmers? In the Netherlands, there was 3,000 farmers were going to have their farms closed. The reason they were going to close the farms is because they were using nitrogen fertilizer. Because they wouldn't stop using nitrogen fertilizer. Why did the government want them to stop? Because there's emissions coming from nitrogen fertilizer. Okay, they're trying to sustain. They're saying you can't use that, it's bad for the environment, so they were ready to shut down the farm. 3,000 farms, not good for food supply. Right now in the Netherlands, I think a lot of the farmers got together. They actually have an actual political party now. They tried to do the same thing in Canada recently within a year, and it was going to cost farmers $48 billion, but there was such a backlash here in Canada, and because of what happened in the Netherlands, the Canadian government actually backed off, but they still have the target. They just took away the mandatory part. So are they going to bring that back in the future? Well, the thing is that we signed this legally binding treaty, and that's the Paris Accord. So we have to do it. How are we going to do that? We either have to break the treaty or we have to invent another way to fertilize these fields. Let's talk about water. One of the target indicators in sustainable development is integrated water resource management. What they say that means is that it's going to protect the world's environment, foster economic growth, and sustainable agriculture, development, promote democratic participation. Does that even mean anything? I don't know what that means. So really what it means is that the government's managing the water. That's what it means. You can't do any of that without government management. So how is it going so far? The last report from 2023, irrigation on TNRD farmland is down 20%. I'm not saying that this water management caused it, but there's a correlation. Since we rolled out with this policy in 2016, it's down by 20%. They're at risk of losing their farms, and there's police out there shutting them down. There's a little video link in this presentation. And by the way, I'm going to put this up on the website later for anybody who's interested. So notice the name in this act, the Water Sustainability Act. If we're sustaining the water, it means we're not developing it. Okay, that's Christy Clark. This was put into legislation in 2014. I think it came into enforcement in 2016. The government controls the use of all the water. The right to use water and flow of water is vested in the government. That's right in the bill. You have to license all agricultural water sources. If you don't, you're a criminal. The NDP policy now is that all domestic users of water wells have to register their water wells. They don't legally have to do it, but they're being pushed as policy, so I think you can see what's probably coming next. And remember that if the minister considers that there's a risk, he can just shut down your water anytime, so there's no proof necessary. And what I want to do right now is just draw a connection between what's happening with the farmers in Westfold and Kamloops. So through this, I learned that Kamloops is in drought restriction level 5 right now. And you guys probably know about that. You're not allowed to wash your car in the driveways or restrictions. Well, why do you think that is? Does anybody know what that is? Like, who made that decision? Kamloops didn't make that decision. No. The Kamloops government did decide it was the province under the Sustainable Water Act. Okay? So now we have somebody in Victoria deciding how much water we can use here in Kamloops. Yeah. Does that make you feel good? Do you feel okay? It makes me a little bit nervous. I don't think people in Victoria really understand. So one thing that the KCSC would advocate for is to bring this power back to local government. And it shouldn't just sit with local government. There should be some scientific or objective factor regarding the use of the water. Yeah. It can't just be somebody's feelings. Yeah. Right.